Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1242 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today I'll be speaking with a returning guest. This is John from episode 688, Type 2 Stories, John. And John's here to give us an update on what's been going on. It's significant. You're going to find this one crazy, inspirational, I think. But let's make sure you heard 688 first, because John's got quite a story. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Maybe you'd like to save 30% off your entire cart at CozyEarth.com. I'm talking about the clothing, the sheets, the towels, and everything else. Go there, fill up that cart, type in the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout, and you will save 30% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. If you're looking for community, go check out my private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. But John's over there. He's Type 2. There's Type 1s. There's caregivers, gestational, moody. Doesn't matter to us. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. An implantable 6-month sensor is what you get with Eversense. But you get so much more. Exceptional and consistent accuracy over 6 months. And distinct on-body vibe alerts when you're high or low. On-body vibe alerts? You don't even know what that means, do you? EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Go find out. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod and the Omnipod 5. Learn more and get started today at Omnipod.com/juicebox.
Hi, it's good to be recording with you again, Scott. I'm John Gvoke, and I have type 2 diabetes. I've had type 2 diabetes for decades, 3 or more decades. I've been using insulin for almost 20 years, and I've been able to turn around and manage my type 2 diabetes and put it into remission at the age, starting at the age of 60. I'm 63 as of last week. I told my story originally 2 years ago in episode 688, and this is an update on, I guess, what I'm doing and things I've learned. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
No, it's my pleasure. And you have a lot to update us on. So that's why I was super excited to talk to you. And at some point, we're going to get to the photo that you sent me to get me ready for this episode. That was really eye-opening. I'll tell people more about it later. But yeah, please check John out on episode 688. And I don't know, I think these will stand alone pretty well. But if you really want to hear the whole story straight through, I think that would be the way to go. John, I'm going to start off with something out of left field for you. What would you say if I told you that when I released the Type 2 Pro Tip series, I lost hundreds of listeners?
I would say that that's very unfortunate, and that a big goal I have had is to close the gap between Type 1 and Type 2 by recognizing at least that Type 2s that use insulin are part of being bold with insulin, and that nobody else's struggles diminish your own. And that in commonality, in a common cause, we find strength. So
I expected a little bit of blowback, like a tiny bit. And I don't want you to get me wrong. I didn't lose like a large percentage of the audience or anything like that. But I lost about 400 listeners in the snap of a finger by putting up Type 2 Pro Tip. And that was it. And it maybe the whole series may have been like 7 or 8 episodes long. And I believe it was spread out over 7 or 8 weeks. So in a week where I put out 5 episodes, one of them was an addition to the Type 2 Pro Tip series. And I even came at it by saying to people like, look, you have type 1 diabetes. The show obviously is valuable for you. Maybe this information could be valuable for someone else you know with type 2. And I thought the show would be a good way to get that information around, because historically, I've watched a lot of people try to help people with type 2 diabetes and it not go anywhere. And often you see companies or organizations, sometimes manufacturers, sometimes pharma companies, they try to kind of create a type 2 community, and it just doesn't work over and over again. So I thought, I'll backdoor it. I'll come in through the type 1s who already know this information's good. I'll go share it with my, uncle who has type 2. And I'm sure some people did that, and it's fantastic. And I actually know personally of people that it's helped. But man, I woke up the next day and I was like, oh, geez, it's not going to be easy to get those 400 people back. Like, it's hard to get a person to listen to a podcast, and to get 400 of them is it's a bit of a hump. But anyway, nevertheless, I persist, and here you are again. So I'm not giving up. I believe, like you, that there's commonality between people who use insulin, have type 2 diabetes, and people with type 1.
Absolutely.
Good.
We're stronger together.
I don't see another way around it, but I'm kind of leading into it this way so that you can maybe recap your first episode in a couple of minutes by telling us how you got to here, meaning knowing about the podcast.
Well, I've been taking insulin for over 17 years. And a big part of the story is that, trying to form my thoughts here, long-acting insulin for type 2 diabetics, people with type 2 diabetes, can be an imprisonment of sorts. When you establish an increasing basal rate through the use of something, especially like Traceba with a 42-hour half-life, you don't modify your behaviors to lower that basal rate, the amount of insulin that covers inappropriate eating in the evening, eating a pizza, needs to be balanced by the same amount of eating in the morning and in the afternoon. So what you end up in is a trap you can't get out of, and you can't try to modify your behaviors part of the day. You have to modify it 24 hours a day. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does.
So I asked my GPs for, over the years, I moved a lot. I've had different doctors, and I would always ask the GP, the general practitioner, I would like to have basal insulin so I can address mealtime increases in my glucose and not be trapped in this higher increasing basal. I started at 40. I ended up at 140. And 140 units is a lot of insulin, or at least for me. It's different for different people, but it was a lot of insulin. I wanted to be able to titrate that downwards to establish a real basal and then use bolus insulin. And they would never do it. Finally, the last GP I got, he replaced a doctor that moved away, and he is my current general practitioner still. And I said to him the same thing. Hey, I want bolus insulin. Now, they always told me to go exercise and lose weight. And you tell that to a guy who's 500 plus pounds, you tell that guy to a guy who's 370 pounds, it doesn't really map. There's something else that needs to be addressed. But this guy told me almost flippantly the best thing that has ever been said. He said, you should go see an endocrinologist. And so a month later, I saw Liz and Elizabeth Driscoll over here at Centaur in Charlottesville. And I told her that I wanted to have bolus insulin. And she said, yeah, is this your current pharmacy? I'll do that right away. I should also point out, though, that before that, in the beginning of our meeting, I told her that I was interviewing her for a job to be my medical assistant, but that I was in charge and that I would be making all the decisions, but that she had the control over the medicine locker, as it were. We had to get along, and she was going to, prescribe the right stuff for me.
Do you think you knew in that moment that, you kind of offhandedly said that a guy over 500 pounds doesn't just need to be told to exercise, as if like what you're really missing is just a brisk walk. And so like, did you know there were other factors at play in your health at that moment? Oh,
absolutely. The thing is, carbohydrate and sugar addiction is a thing. And it doesn't mean you don't, I imagine even if you're a heroin addict, you probably know that the last thing you need to be doing is heroin. Mm-hmm. And you probably are very intimately familiar with the failures in your life it causes. And clearly a guy is 540 pounds and cannot perform basic hygienic tasks is aware of that, right?
Yeah.
Is that addressing what you're asking?
It does. Yeah. I just didn't know if you were blissfully unaware and just cruising along, or if you were aware but unable to adjust.
Painfully aware, but deeply addicted and not given access to the types of care that were necessary to break me out of that.
Okay.
And part of it is I have a lot of resentment over having been prescribed long-acting insulin and then ever increasing amounts because that really became a prison that I couldn't get out of. And then not being willing to prescribe me bolus insulin and allow me, as soon as I got bolus insulin, everything turned around. Now, of course, that required me to make use of that, right? You can't just give somebody bolus insulin and it changes. Mm-hmm. But I had the tools at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So Liz was happy to work with me. And then she said the thing that changed my life. She said, have you ever thought about a pump? And I laughed and I said, I'm here trying to get bolus insulin for the first time. And you're asking me, a person with type 2 diabetes, how about a pump? And in my mind is the Darth Vader, huffing and puffing through the mask with tubes and steam. And she says, well, no, there's also tubeless pumps. By the time I got home from that appointment, I went to the pharmacy. I live in the country, so it's like 40 minutes to get home. But I went to the pharmacy, picked up my insulin. I'm sitting there with it. And the insulin rep calls me and says that I was on Medicaid at the time. And he says that, we just had a change in Medicaid in the state of Virginia, and I'm sending you out a whole starter kit if you're game for it. And I was like, well, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then everything changed. And I started open source iOS Loop within a few weeks of that.
That's quick. How did you get to that so quickly?
I've been professionally involved in open source my entire career. And so I've always been aware of other open source projects and things like that. And I've been aware of diabetes. And so I knew there was an artificial pancreas stuff out there.
I see.
And so I was like, are you kidding me? I've got the bolus insulin. I've got the iPhone. I've got the compilers and things. I have the skills.
And now I have the pump.
Straight to the head.
Yeah, here I go.
Yeah, I'm going straight to the head of the class, baby.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So, Jesus, you used just basal insulin for 17 years.
For 14 years or so.
Okay.
I can't nail down exactly when I started. It was somewhere between 2004 and 2007.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I went to a doctor's appointment and had an A1C test and it was 14.5. And the doctor's like, I have a very busy career and was responsible for managing operations infrastructures for large internet sites and things like this. And which is like a 24/7, very demanding job. He said, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't know. And so he prescribed me the insulin. And I remember I went back to get started with it. And he showed me to inject through my jeans and to reuse needles from day one. How about that?
There you go.
So what were you going to ask? I'm so sorry.
I know. Don't be sorry. I want to make sure that everyone understands that idea of this prison. So plain spokenly, you're eating poorly and you have type 2 diabetes. Your body cannot keep up with what you're taking in. So they give you this basal insulin, but then what happens? Do your blood sugars start to come down and then your eating goes up and then you end up with more insulin? Is it just keep perpetuating back and forth like that? Or no? This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. The Eversense CGM is the only long-term CGM with 6 months of real-time glucose readings, giving you more convenience, confidence, and flexibility. And you didn't hear me wrong. I didn't say 14 days. I said 6 months. So if you're tired of changing your CGM sensor every week, you're tired of it falling off or the adhesive not lasting as long as it should or the sensor failing before the time is up, if you're tired of all that, you really owe it to yourself to try the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. I'm here to tell you that if the hassle of changing your sensors multiple times a month is just more than you want to deal with, if you're tired of things falling off and not sticking or sticking too much or having to carry around a whole bunch of extra supplies in case something does fall off, then taking a few minutes to check out EversenseCGM.com/juicebox might be the right thing for you. When you use my link, you're supporting the production of the podcast and helping to keep it free and plentiful. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. The fear of missing out is overwhelming sometimes, but the fear of missing out on Omnipod, we don't want you to have that. A lot of people in my private Facebook group talk about their love for Omnipod 5. Have you ever seen those posts and thought, I wish I could have that experience with an insulin pump too? If you answered yes, you might be experiencing FOMO, fear of missing out on Omnipod. Symptoms may include, but of course are not limited to, wishing you could wear outfits without pockets and fantasizing about jumping into swimming pools without disconnecting from your insulin pump first. Maybe you're dreaming about walking past a doorknob or a handle on your dresser without getting your tubing caught. If you're having those dreams, good news. You don't have to suffer from FOMO any longer. You can see what you're missing by trying Omnipod 5 for yourself at my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. Get started today with the Omnipod 5. omnipod.com/juicebox. Throw away your FOMO.
That's a good question. One element of it is that insulin causes insulin resistance. And the more insulin you take and the more food you then input, it's a cycle. It's a feedback loop that increases the amount of insulin you take for the amount of resistance you have and the amount of food you're eating. And as you turn one of those up, the others turn up with it.
Do you mean that as you add basal insulin, your body becomes less and less effective, and therefore you need more of the man-made basal?
Well, that's part of it. Of course, in my case, and in the case I think of many, I have an extreme eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the number one propellant in my diabetes.
Okay.
There's genetic predispositions. There's economic and other access to food and things that happen and so forth. There's a lot of things. In my case, it was a extreme eating disorder related to, childhood trauma, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it literally fed on itself. So the prison of long-acting insulin for a person in my condition is that it gives you a license to eat a large pizza for dinner and to follow it up with big chocolatey treats and things like this. And what that eating is doing is it's creating dopamine releases that are, it's just straight up like taking drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And it is taking a drug. It's a different method, right?
Yeah.
And so you're addicted to that high. You're addicted to that. And so, you hear about, like, maybe you don't hear about it, but the idea is a person doses on heroin and all of a sudden everything's just hunky-dory. Everything's absolutely wonderful in the world. Even if you're in an alley, on a piss-soaked mattress by a dumpster, everything becomes wonderful. And that's what food does to a person with my pathology.
Gotcha. All right.
With my history.
Thank you.
And so if you eat that pizza and everything, the next morning you still have that high basal rate.
Yeah. And so almost functionally what you think is so was there actually a time where your blood sugar was one of the reasons you finally could stop eating at the end of a day? Because you're like, I can't keep doing this. But then all of a sudden the insulin felt like a crutch? Or is that not right?
Insulin was always long-acting insulin was a enabler and a entrapper. Does that?
I think so. No, I think I understand. I just wanted you to really spell it out for me. So once you get a pump and you get to an algorithm and now you're covering your meals with bolus insulin, how is that different from just basal?
I'll tell you what it was. And it was what I envisioned it would be all along. And remember, I'm an engineer and so forth. So I have a very certain place on the spectrum with my mind. Once I had that tools in hand, I could see how much the foods I were eating were directly impacting my glucose performance. So throughout my life, and if you're not I can solve any problem, but if you're not driven to solve it, you're glib about it, right? So at one point I convinced myself that sugar wasn't the problem, it was fat.
Okay.
In foods and all these different things, right? And once I started taking bolus insulin and really paying attention to it as I do, I saw the effect of every single thing I put in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly realized that for me, grains were not helpful.
Okay.
And they're not, I had a budget, right? I had a performance profile. I had a thing I was trying to do. And I was trying to reduce my overall use of insulin from the beginning. And I was trying to achieve, at that point, I wasn't trying to achieve normal glycemic values, but I was trying to achieve non-life-threatening values.
Gotcha.
And it happened very quickly, though. And I started realizing the different kinds of foods and the ways of eating that were harming me. And I just dialed them out. I was able to kick the drug almost cold turkey. I remember it now. Like I thought, I'll just have a sandwich in the middle of the day. Just a nice sandwich with a lot of vegetables on it and some meat and just 2 pieces of bread that I'll dose for. And then what happened was I realized that even though I could dose for those 2 pieces of bread, that they had a significant carbohydrate impact and a long tail effect that I had to manage, that I had to use more insulin to deal with, that I had to pay more attention to. And then it became evident to me that I could just have that vegetables with some meat on top of it and not have the other impact.
Right.
And it just made more sense for me.
Okay. It's interesting that you had that problem I mean, would you consider this disorder lifelong?
It pretty much manifested at about 8 years of age.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much lifelong. So my point is, it's interesting that getting the pump, and I guess I'm assuming a glucose monitor as well. And then yes, is that right?
I've been using Dexcom for a little over 7 years.
Yeah.
So I had been using Dexcom for 4 years prior to being finally given bolus insulin. It was just a waste. It was just a thing that would alarm all the time. I'd be on phone calls with friends and they'd be like, oh, that's your alarm. And I'd be like, oh, whatever.
So it's interesting, though, isn't it, that you had the information, it didn't get you to change, but then suddenly once you had another tool, you were like, oh, I eat the bread, my blood sugar goes up, I'm going to stop eating the bread. Let's go. I'm on this journey. You don't know what pushed you in over? It sounds like you think it's the pump, but I don't understand why.
No. One is observational. The Dexcom is observational.
Mm-hmm.
The insulin is interventional.
Okay. So you felt more powerful with the
yes.
bolus insulin. Okay.
Yes. And it was also a way to get off of the long acting.
Gotcha. All right. I understand.
And the funny thing is, I didn't titrate the long acting because I immediately recognized that a pump with its microbolusing is basal and bolus.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
That was pretty cool right there. I was able to holistically, I didn't have to titrate. It wasn't like MDI, right?
Right.
I didn't have to work those against each other or with each other.
You see the impacts, you stay. It's amazing you were able to just stay on that new path, which is laudable. It's fantastic. But you stay on that new path, and where in there do you find the podcast?
Immediately.
Okay.
Immediately, you got search tools. You got Facebook. You can search there. You can search Google. You can do stuff. So you start saying who knows, what are the outlets? Where do you learn about how to use insulin? Actually, literally.
Mm-hmm.
My thing was, I've got this stuff. How do I learn how to use it? And I'm very antagonistic to anybody that has anything to sell. It just raises my spidey sense in a big way. And so when people have a miracle diet, or they want to sell you cinnamon, or they want to tell you how you need to do it, It puts me off because, as you can tell, I'm pretty much think I know everything already. I'm very, engaged, and I want to form my own opinions and stuff. And I don't want to just buy a cure. And so social media is a great place. I've been on social media all my life, since the Usenet and things back in the way old days. I just wanted to find a place where I could talk to people that were doing the same things. And when you look for type 2 groups on Facebook, I'm an old man, so I don't Twitter or ticker talker much, right? I'm looking on Facebook for groups, and every type 2 group I found was part of a company and had a thing that they wanted to do with you and all. And then your group was about being bold with insulin, and that made a lot of sense to me. Okay. And I reached out to you very early, and I said, help me. What the hell do I do with this? And, you gave me some insight and suggested I read the group and do more there. And I did. And then before long, I actually reached out to you and I said, I wanted to start a type 2 group. And you suggested that would be a great thing, but let me know that you were also working on providing type 2 participation in the group and support in the group. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to wait and see where that goes. Yeah. And so I'm honored to have been an early guest, and I'm honored to be part of the group. And it's really cool to be here again with you, Scott.
John, I appreciate that. You're one of the key reasons that the group attracts type 2s at this point too, because you've been so open and clear about what you've been through. So I'd like to do that here too. I'd like to talk a little bit about what happens. I think maybe we should jump into the weight loss journey. How long does that go on for? I'm right to say that you're basically a pretty low carb guy, right? And that's been since you found the pumping.
That's a funny thing. It's not overnight, right?
Okay.
And so even before getting the insulin, I was trying to modify my behaviors. And in the year or two before I finally got a hold of the bolus insulin, I was actually deeply hypo about a half a dozen times. The rescue squad had to come out 4 times, and they transported me to the hospital twice. And that was because I was taking a lot of insulin and trying to eat a lot less food. Yeah. And there's the prison. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I've been making moves in the right direction all my life. When I was 33, 30 years ago, I lost 200 pounds, and I reduced from 540 to about 340, 350. And then I vacillated between that range, 370, 350, down to 280, like 5 times in my life.
Wow.
And so the fact was, I knew how to moderate my behaviors. But when I got to 270, I couldn't lose any more weight. And so then you just kind of give up, right? And that was a thing that happened. But what I wanted to address is when I got the bolus insulin, it didn't turn around overnight. It was a sequence of continuing refinements and adaptations.
Okay.
And so I got my A1C down from a 9.4 with like no time in range to a 6 with, 80% in range. And I've been under 5% for almost 2 years.
Wow.
And my standard deviation is under 15. And my time in range, my personal range that I track is 70 to 120. And I achieve mid 90s% all the time, pretty much. The thing that screws that up is Dexcom. Mankind doesn't have a way to measure glucose, whether it's A1C or your finger stick or whatever. It's always an approximation. I'm fond of saying if I became a billionaire, I would focus on not a cure for anything, but how to measure diagnostics, accurate diagnostics, right? Because more so than a cure for diabetes or a cure for any other thing is effective treatment. That's the thing that we can do now. So that's a passion of mine. Measurements include A1C and your data from your Dexcom, and you have to take it all together as a bigger picture. You know what I'm saying? I achieved those things, but it took a long time. It was quick, but I mean, it wasn't overnight, right? It was a continual process of refinement. And recently, in the last 2 months or a little bit more, my diabesity and I have eliminated snacking, and that has had a significant improvement. So even when I was in these numbers, removing the snacking has caused an increase in weight loss and a reduction in my waist size.
Wow. How many calories do you think you take in a day?
When I started this, I determined only to count carbs and measure glucose. And I felt everything else would fall into place. And that was largely true. You get to a point of diminishing returns on one angle of attack and you have to add others.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking at there's other elements of what's going on. Is I found that my beta cell function was at the level of a person with type 1 diabetes. It was insufficient to support life. At this stage of the game, I was able to turn it around. And now my latest C-peptide shows me at the low end of normal. And so, they say, do something about your type 2 diabetes now before it's too late. And what I'll tell you is it's never too late.
How much insulin do you use today, like your total daily dose, versus the first day you put on that pump? Do you just vaguely, you don't need to be exact, but what do you think the difference is?
I'll tell you that the day before I put on that pump, I was running 140 units of Tresiva. I can't remember where it was immediately, but I got it down to half of that pretty darn quickly, very quickly. And then getting it down the next half, like from 70 to right now, my total daily usage of insulin, bolus and basal combined, is running about 35 units a day.
Wow, how about
and
that?
That's been the case for a few months.
Yeah, that's a quarter of the amount of that basal insulin from beginning of your story. It's really something.
The increased, the larger part of that insulin, right, when it was at the higher end, resulted in things like a 9.4 A1C with no time in range,
right,
and all of that to the numbers I have. So it's not even, you can't even do the simple math of 1/4 of the insulin, right? You're talking about orders of magnitude results.
Yeah, I mean, being in the situation you were in and just giving you basal insulin is really, it's almost cruel, honestly, because it's,
yes,
yeah, you know what I mean? It's slowing down your demise, but it's not really doing anything to stop it. It's now just crawling forward a little slower than it did the day before.
I strongly believe that when a person with type 2 diabetes is introduced to insulin, it should be done in a very focused manner with reviews, and not just as like, go take this and go away and die slowly. It should be, here this is, now let's do behavioral modifications and other things so that you can reduce the amount of insulin we have to give you right now. And also, people with type 2 diabetes who are on insulin should be introduced to bolus insulin as soon as possible.
Okay. Do you have any idea what shifted inside of you to help with the addiction to the sugar?
I think that my ability to escape that happened much earlier than my access to the tools to enable it.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's not as instantaneous as the story makes it seem. You had made the decision, but didn't know how to do it.
Well, that's what I tried to convey with like the year before getting it, having 6 extreme hypos.
Yeah.
And all that experience. I mean, that was me trying to change my behaviors, but getting slapped into the hypo lows by the insulin.
I see. Okay. Can you put a weight on that? Let's go to when I don't know, you found the podcast. Like, what do you weigh that around that time?
350 pounds.
350. So you had gotten off 200 pounds on your own.
Yeah. And for like 30 years.
For 30 years. So you were up to 5 something. You lost 200. You maintained that for 30 years at this like 350-ish range.
No, actually, I went from 350 to 280 like 5 times.
Oh, so you would bounce in over those 30 years, you'd bounce from 350 to 280?
Yeah, like about 5 times, 4 or 5 times.
How did you get from 350 to 280?
Same way I got from 540 to 350. Calorie deficit, and for the most part, but also swimming. To get the first 200 pounds, I went and swam a mile a day, 3 times a week at the gym here at University of Virginia. And that was a big part of it. Swimming was my thing when I was a kid. I had some training.
John, can I take a detour for a second?
Yes, please.
What's it like jumping into a public pool when you're 550 pounds?
That's a very good question. A little bit more background about myself, and I touched on this maybe even more depth in my first episode. I was raised institutionalized. I'm diagnosed autistic and so forth and things. And so it was a pretty weird childhood. And when I was about 17 and living on my own on the road, hitchhiking, was when I just realized that I'll take my shirt off if I want to take my shirt off. And I was, over 350 pounds at that point. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what other people mock me or say about me anymore, because it's just about them. And you've probably heard the concept of flying your freak flag high.
You did that?
I'm sorry?
That was your vibe?
That was my vibe, is, you know what? I'm done apologizing for being me. Now, I didn't give myself that break internally as much, but I just couldn't maintain hiding behind the couch and being afraid of the other kids like when I was younger.
But still, it made you feel a certain way internally.
It was liberating, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Or you mean the shame or something. Yeah. I had to get over that. So you know what? I got in the pool and swam, and I'll tell you a funny thing. I was involved in a faculty council that met with the administrative vice president of the university, who was really the guy who was running the university. Mm-hmm. And a guy there says, "Hey, I see you in the pool all the time, and it's really impressive what you do." And that kind of feedback is rewarding, right? Yeah. And I'll tell you what, man, I swam my first lap to my last lap at the same speeds, going at that much weight.
Wow.
It was rewarding. And you know what? When I get to share my successes in the group, it's very rewarding that people exhort me and congratulate me. But more so, it's about the lurkers, right? And so I like the idea that maybe in the group I can carry a bit of a message for the 40,000 that aren't posting every day.
Yeah.
And that they can see that. Go ahead.
No, I was going to tell you that I do like a weight loss diary since I started using a GLP last year. And it's not talked about online. Nobody brings it up. Like, I don't hear from people like, "Oh, I'm liking it," or anything, but I get a lot of private notes about it. Like, this made me feel good, or I connected with what you said here, or you motivated me to do this or that. Like, but it's not online. Like, whereas with the podcast, when it's about diabetes, you'll get like, people will be out front about it. They're just like, "Oh, I heard this episode. It was really valuable, blah, blah, blah." Like, they're not afraid to do that. And then like they'll jump on, but no one's mentioned it publicly, but it gets a lot of like private notes. I just think it's one of those things that, generally speaking, I don't know that everybody's looking to talk about in public. It's just interesting when you put out content the way I do, and you get to watch how people interact with it. It's a real learning experience to see how people think and feel and what they think is important versus what they'll say out loud sometimes. Just very interesting. I'm sorry I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
No, you did not at all. And that's an interesting dynamic that I'm impressed by your ability to deal with the wide variety of people that come to your door, to our tribe.
No, I appreciate that. No.
And you're very inviting and open to people. You tolerate quite a bit, but you work real hard to keep the conversation positive. And so, you know what? There's people that are actively participating, and everybody that's actively participating y'all are addressing and speaking to a much larger audience.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll never know it. Like, I'll even never know to the extent that it happens, but I get enough feedback to realize it does. Like, just to hear from somebody who said, hey, I've lost 40 pounds since you started your weight loss journey, and I started mine because of you. And I think, I don't know this person's name. I've never heard them before. I don't recognize them. I go to my group. They're not in the group. And I'm like, wow, it's fascinating. Like, I just said something positive, maybe hopeful, and I just put it out in the world. And then that person lost 40 pounds. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's a message in a bottle.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's a really nice way to think of it. Okay, so you mess around between 350 and 280 for 30 years or so. Swimming, not swimming, back and forth. I guess the battle between the food and the exercise goes back and forth. I would also imagine that getting to 250 is great, but you're still standing there at 250 going, my God, I still have weight to lose. Like, this is my whole goddamn life, right? Like, and so where does it really just start, like, downhill skiing for you? Like, where does it start where you're like, I'm on this path and I almost can't get off it now, to where you are right now? Tell people what you weigh right now.
This morning, I weighed 250.9 pounds on the scale. I've been right at 250 for a couple of weeks now.
And this for you, a weight is, you think this is a good weight for you? Do you think there's more? Do you think you're too thin? What's your opinion of your body right now?
And we'll talk about that surgery in a moment, I think.
Yeah.
But I weigh less now than I did when I was 15 years old.
Wow. How about that? That's something.
And my goal, I have stage 1 obesity right now. At my height, I was stage 6+, and I had a body mass index of 66.
Okay.
And now it's about 33. It's imperfect math, right? Unless you do that thing where you get in a sling and go into a saltwater bath and they weigh you and all that.
Yeah,
but
close enough.
The math says,
yeah.
So the math says I'm about 33, which puts me in stage 1 obesity. And my goal is to lose another 30 pounds and become overweight. You like the irony of that? My goal is to be overweight.
Yeah, trust me, I've had that goal. So how tall are you, just for context for people?
I'm 6'1".
Okay.
Or as I like to say, I'm 6'1.5".
All right, listen, if I was 6'1.5", I'd add it in too. Okay.
Well, I mean, because it affects the BMI calculation. It makes it a bit easier.
Oh, I see. You didn't get shorter when you lost weight? I've seen people lose shoe sizes.
I would think you'd get taller when you lose weight because of less vertical compression.
Oh, John, you're saying something there. I was thinking about literally fat under your feet.
Well, that's interesting. I'll tell you a thing to maybe interesting is I ended up essentially crippling myself. And I use a chair in the shower. I use a chair in the kitchen. I use the electric cart at the store. But I can swim a mile every day. Before surgery, for 2 months before surgery, I'll swim a mile a day, 6 days a week. And how do you do that, right? Well, it's the 0G thing. It's taking the compression off of the spine. And so I'm trying to make that better. I also recently had I'm glad to be able to get this in here. I had a conversation with my GP. It was only about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I said, we need to reevaluate our relationship. And we need to have a relationship where you understand that you are working for me and that I'm in charge. So I had that same conversation with him. And he was happy to do it based on, I guess, the results.
Yeah.
And I said, the first thing I want to do is I want to remove a statin from my portfolio. And I said, I'd like your advice on how to titrate that, how to reduce that dosage. And he said, you know what? Let's just take it away completely and we'll see what's up in 2 months. And then if you want to, we'll titrate upwards from the minimum dosage. And I was like, yeah, we're doing it now. Mm-hmm. So the reduction of the statins may help with muscular issues.
I was going to say, tell people why. So but let's go backwards a little bit. You've crippled yourself. How go through that?
Well, you can't weigh 540 pounds and, have what passes for an active life, right? Work and all this kind of stuff and it not have issues. A long, long time ago, I think it was an MRI or something. And they said I had compression fractures in the spine and of course. And so you can't weigh that much. Now, I think we're getting close to the surgery now because after losing all that weight, I was carrying around a huge apron of flesh. Mm-hmm. And imagine if you wore a sack of potatoes around your belly with a belt on your back what that would do to you after
How
decades.
it pulls on you. Yeah. Well, John, listen, I've only lost 50 pounds. Okay. And I say only because obviously you're in a different league, but what has changed for me? My knees don't hurt. I don't have plantar fasciitis anymore. My back's not always stiff. I feel better, generally speaking. Like I feel healthier, more awake, more alive, like all that stuff. Like I sleep better. I have significantly less acid reflux, almost none. Just, all of these different things that have changed with my weight that I swear to you, if you would have asked me prior to losing 50 pounds, hey, Scott, is your plantar fasciitis from your weight? I would have said, no, probably not. But I mean, now that you look at it like in hindsight, you're like, well, obviously it was. You know what I mean? Like, why do my knees hurt? Well, my knee hurt because, I have a little cartilage breakdown in my knee. Like, it must be genetic or something. Or it's because I had 50 pounds. I don't know how to explain that I'm a pretty bright person and that I didn't know my knee hurt because I was fat. I know that sounds insane, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was tired because of that. I didn't understand any of that. And for context, I used a GLP to lose weight. So I haven't significantly changed the things I'm eating. I honestly I wasn't a particularly poor eater. My body just didn't deal with food well. My digestion was wrong. I wasn't holding nutrients correctly. Like all this other stuff was happening. This GLP has changed all of that for me. John, my ferritin, I just had my blood work done. My ferritin's like, I forget what it is, 166 or 188. Like it doesn't matter. It's up in that range. I haven't had an infusion in like a year and a half. Before that, if I didn't have an iron infusion every 6 months, my ferritin would be down to 10 and I was shutting off. My body wasn't even holding my nutrients. And I don't even know how to explain why that is exactly yet. Obviously, a GLP slows down your digestion. Is it just leaving the food in my stomach longer so I can actually absorb the nutrients I'm eating? Like, I don't know. Do I have a GLP deficiency? I don't know. But what I do know is my knee doesn't hurt. My back doesn't hurt. My feet don't hurt. I'm more alive and awake. And I swear to God, if you would have asked me 2 years ago what that was from, I wouldn't have said my weight. So I don't even know how to explain that.
Healthy lifestyle is the fundament for a better life. And whatever disease you have, whether it's curable or, like in my case, reversible, in type 1, there is no fundamental cure, but there's treatment. Eat well, shake your bones as much as you can, and things are going to be better.
Yeah, I just think that's true. I mean, not that, again, if you would have asked me that, I would have said that. I just didn't think it applied to me for some reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm sorry. So we've got this weight off you now and you're carrying around a lot of extra skin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You saw the pictures.
Yeah.
It's pretty profound. And yeah, if you look at the size of the hands in some of the pictures and then transfer that to the picture of the final removal, you can get an idea of the scale there.
I mean, you sent me a photo of yourself. It looks like it's taken basically like from your neck down. You're splayed basically, right? And the truth is that you have to really focus for a minute to realize it's a person. Like it really is that like just, I don't know what the word is, altered.
It looks like a cattle abattoir kind of thing, right? It looks like they're cutting a cattle open to make meat of it or something, in my opinion.
Listen, if you would have told me it was a giant tuna on a boat and they were getting ready to cut it up, I would have believed that for a half a second.
Yeah.
I mean, how do they measure what they took off you? Is it inches or weight, or how do they relay it to you?
That's a very good question, because when they take that skin off, it has the adipose tissue attached to it. You don't lose fat cells. And typically you don't increase the amount of fat cells you have, except for when you get into extreme obesity, you actually do create new fat cells. But what you do is you distend them, you fill them, right? They get larger and larger. So when you've lost the weight, it's still there. And in people who maybe have lost the weight as a result of rapid weight loss due to like bariatric surgery or whatever, and then they say, have to keep it off for 18 months or something. And by the time they take that off, there might even have some adjunct liposuction to go with it, right? To bring everything together. In my case, the doctor noted that the bulk of the weight loss, and also, this is the other thing, I was down to 270 when I had the surgery.
Okay.
were 275.
Oh God, John, 25 pounds of that is skin?
So no.
No.
The actual weight of the skin was 13 pounds, but the doctor said, had this been like an 18-month weight loss, it would have weighed considerably more.
Oh.
Because of this condition of the fat cell.
Yeah.
So what I had was a very emaciated layer of fat. And that ended up causing complications with fluid, with drainage later. But on the other hand, in terms of healing, I healed like a Star Trek movie. You know what I mean? Like when they pass the hand over the wound, the alien does, and it heals right away.
Yeah.
I healed amazingly fast. And the doctor pointed out, and he trained his staff on this as well, that drainage is just a standard component of the healing, and it's not a complication. Mine took a long time, but everything else healed up so amazingly well. And I would like to say at this point this out too. We used Loop during my operations. The iOS Loop app was used during my operation to maintain my blood glucose levels.
How long was the operation?
5 hours plus.
Wow. And was there someone there managing your diabetes for you when you were out, or you just let the Loop run it?
Well, so, there's two people in the surgery that are the prime operators. One guy's is keeping you alive, and the other guy is doing the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So the anesthesiologist is key. And I met my anesthesiologist before the surgery, and we had meetings, and he said he was very interested in using Loop. And so we used Loop during my surgery. So he had my phone on his station and did not have D5 set up, dextrose 5%, right? He did not have a dextrose solution set up for me. He was ready to do so if needed. He knew my control, and he knew what I was doing. And we had done a Zoom session where I showed him how Loop worked. We ran it through my surgery, and by gum, it was just amazing. Fantastic. And I know it opens the door for other people, because it's not likely that you're going to get a surgical team to do that.
Arden's had short procedures where they've let it run. She's also had procedures where they told me to shut it off, and I pretended to shut it off and left it on.
Yeah, but this was like a full-on 5 hours of actual cutting.
No. This was a 45-minute.
8 hours
of recovery where you're not awake afterwards.
No, 8 hours front to end of unconsciousness, right?
Okay.
So it's about 3 hours. And I mean, tacked onto either end. And, I get that out of my Night Scout too. I can see.
Yeah, listen, too. I mean, the truth is, it's a good example of good settings and how you can fast with diabetes too, if your settings are good and you're on a good algorithm like that. So,
well, having said that, because of my diabetes is my diabetes, and what I do is what I do. But I eat once a day.
What time of the day?
Later than I should, because I work and I get involved in things. So I eat about 7 p.m.
Walk me through your day then. You wake up, you don't eat, you drink anything?
Water.
Okay.
Oh, coffee. I love coffee, but I'll tell you about coffee is I don't allow myself to have coffee every day.
Because?
Chemical dependency.
I see. You don't want to get hooked on it. Yeah. I don't drink coffee, but boy, I see some people, they go after it like it's a little too important. You know what I mean?
It has a physiological effect.
Yeah.
And I need to be in control of my physiology.
Mm-hmm. You think it would be a gateway to sugar and other things?
At this point, no, because I'm hell-bent. But I do think it can be something that everything in moderation. Yeah. And I think that too much of anything is not good. And caffeine is a drug. And I don't want to stimulate those portions of my brain, even if it's not going to get me into sugar.
I see you.
I don't want to be a junkie.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. Okay, so I'd like to know a little more about the surgery. So where does most of are they taking it from limbs, from midsection, everywhere?
I have a 30-inch suture going horizontally across my body, just above the pubis, just above the mons, right?
Yeah.
And it goes 30 inches from each side to each side. I'm 46 inches now, so you can imagine. Oh my gosh, I never even thought about this till right now. But 16 inches of me is not hinge, or is the hinge, right? Mm-hmm. The other is this 30-inch scar that goes all the way around. And so what they do is they cut that just below my moobs. I had to get that joke in there. They cut me just, somewhere below, up high north. And then they cut me right above the mons, maybe a little bit deep there because he pulled it up a bit, which was lovely.
Yeah.
And my doctor, every surgeon has a different philosophy and so forth. And some people want to be what they call snatched. So they have a tight bod, but I'm not in the tight bod kind of category. he doesn't want to pull you too tight. So you have to walk over in a hunch for a long time and all this.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, they cut you up high, they cut you down low, and they remove the section tapering towards the edges, right? It tapers down. And then they sew you back up to top end of the bottom end.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. Those pictures, you don't understand it till you see the pictures.
No, there's no way to understand it, actually. Was it painful, the recovery?
Not at all. And it's different for everybody else. I have a high pain threshold. I have chronic pain. And for me, I didn't take any painkillers at all.
Okay. I do wonder if, not to your degree, but I do wonder if this is a thing I'll need eventually. Or if I'll just, because it's funny, I don't think about it. Like, I have to say, visually, I don't care. I'm so much happier being smaller that this bit that's around my midsection still, there's still fat there. I'm not done yet. But if it was just skin, I honestly don't know if I would care. I'm so happy just feeling better.
And that's a lot of the way I felt about it, but it becomes physically debilitating. It is hygienically and sexually limiting. It is caused me to be effectively, crippled.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to turn that around too. I said to somebody at the store the other day, we were talking, I said, I decided to swallow my pride and take the ride. So I'm in the little electric cart. And it's funny, I used to be in that little electric cart and be a big guy in the electric cart. And now I'm, in our society, a normal sized guy, as it were. And I'm in the cart. And, I want to get up and start walking, but I know that halfway through my shopping, or a quarter of the way through, I will not be able to continue
You'd be exhausted
to carry on. So I have to, there's a spoons theory of disability. You have so many spoons to spend in a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to spend all of my ability starting to shop and not being able to finish. And then before I took the cart, I would do that. I would get stuff real quick, go to the checkout, sit there leaning against the candy, try to support my weight and my pain, and sit in the car for 10 minutes before I could drive home.
Yeah.
So I decided at one point to give myself that break. But now I'm kind of at the point where I want to go there for a small shopping and do it without sitting down in the cart. But then I don't want people to say, oh, you've been faking it or whatnot.
Wait, John,
it's complicated.
I got a quick little procedure on my big toe once. And the next day, Kelly's like, I'm going to go to the wrist show. I'm like, I'm totally coming with you. And she goes, what? You can't walk? I'm like, I know, I want to drive the cart. I rolled around that place like a king on that cart. I was like, this is amazing. So what do you think? I mean, you're obviously on a path to get your, what is it you're trying to get back? Muscle tone? What do you think you're lacking right now?
Yes. The first thing I'm trying to do is get some core strength back. And when I was swimming before the surgery, that was really working out well. And I wanted to add to that a home gym component of barbells and working on some weight training. Not necessarily a complete, we call the long, not the barbells, but the full weight thing. Maybe not that to start, but just the barbells, and do a bunch of different exercises to start bringing that in, which would continue to increase the metabolic rate. It would do muscular things that are important for me and all that. I'll tell you, a problem is the work I do, I don't get paid very much money at all. And I'm kind of just barely making it. And my car went completely butt up. And so I don't have a car and I can't get to the pool. And I am desperately trying to find a used car. I've got a limited amount of money that I can spend on it. And the used car market is insane.
Yeah.
And I live rural. So by the time I find something that's a candidate, I have to drive a whole day there and back to look at it. And there's undisclosed damage. So right now, the biggest thing in my life is getting mobile again and getting back in the pool right away. And the thing is, can I start doing some weight or resistance band training right now? Yes, I can. And I need to not use the swimming as an excuse for that. But the reality is that time in the pool with the 0G means everything to me.
Big deal, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if your doctor couldn't get a transport for you to the pool under insurance.
Well, the problem with that is I have marketplace insurance. I'm thrilled that they cover my diabetic supplies, right?
Right.
They're not going to go too far into that. And the other thing is the timing of it. So my work.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
I train people how to use Loop. They schedule sessions with me. My calendar is available. They schedule sessions with me, and I find that people are on my calendar, right? That they just show up. And I have to schedule around that. Going to swim the mile that I do, it takes me an hour, but it takes the whole round trip at least 90 minutes. And I've got to fit that in my day, and I've got to be, so you can't the transport is late today. Or, I have to be back at my home office to do the next session. And so that's a limiter. And, again, there's all kinds of rationalizations, and you have to not let those stop you or slow you down. So, I'm once again convicted that I need to get out some resistance bands and work with that. I do have a little treadmill under the desk thing that I give some work with. Yeah, I'm sorry. My answer is I can do more regardless, and I need to.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's tough. Like if the walking, I mean, the zero gravity of the water is what's making it possible for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it really is. Now, I'm hoping that plus the weight training can get me core strength that'll take some stress off of the back. But I also believe that the statins have been causing me some muscle issues that may be playing into it a lot as well.
I was going to ask, how long of being off of them do you think until you feel value from that?
I'm very much enamored of the scientific method and not allowing correlation to be mistaken for causation and things like this. So I really try to get long data on things. I can tell you that subjectively, it feels like I'm feeling better. I'm sleeping. I don't have cramp. So I can't sleep more than about 2 or 3 hours, and I have to get up and walk it off.
Okay.
And I've been able to sleep 5 or 6 hours.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm also ingesting salts. I'm increasing my specific salt intakes, not just salt on my food. I'm using a salt supplement. I often get very bad debilitating cramps in my legs at night, and those are dramatically reduced as well.
Nice.
So give me another 6 months and I'll tell you, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But right now, I think I don't think it's any worse. I have to have a cholesterol test in another month or two and just get a handle on what's happening there. I think it's better.
Good. Well, I'm glad. Just thinking about your predicament, and it's hard to I'm trying to look for other ideas that would be valuable for you, but I don't know none are popping to mind,
Yeah, basically, I just need to find the miracle used car that's going to work out for me for, the $6,000 I've got.
Yeah.
And I just need to run about to do groceries and stuff. And as soon as I do that, I'm going to be a regular fixture at the pool again. And that's going to be a really cool thing.
I don't want to get into I'm not trying to get into your finances, but okay. All right. Well, hopefully this is something you can figure out. So
I have friends that talk about a GoFundMe, but I'm the guy who contributes to GoFundMes. So
I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but you said that when he cut you, at your waist and he cinched it up, like you were like, which was lovely. And I was like, is that my penis looks bigger joke? I couldn't tell if that's what you were doing or not.
No, you know what? It's funny that it's a joke and all, but you know what? I discovered that I have one.
It's crazy.
Like I mentioned earlier, hygienic and sexual function is vastly improved. You know, when not to be graphic or anything, but when I put my hand around my pelvis, I feel a bone.
Mm. Yeah.
Right? I can do the Michael Jackson thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Woo!
Prior to that, no, right? Like John.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Let me, I might turn this into an After Dark episode, and I hope not. But in order to use a public restroom to urinate, I would have to go into a stall because I would have to drop my trousers to my waist, lift up my belly, and do my business. Mm-hmm. And you know what's a wonder? It just sounds so silly. I can use my fly now.
No, I tell you, that must have been exciting. I'm being serious too. Yeah,
I am too.
Yeah.
And they sell hygienic aids to be able to take care of when you defecate for when you're that large.
I've seen the towel on the stick thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to have to take a shower. It's all of a sudden become too TMI, but it gives depth to the thing.
No, of course. So for clarity for people, you at that weight, a bowel movement, you had to move to the shower afterwards because there was no reaching to what you needed to reach.
Yeah, and I wasn't going to get a towel on a stick.
Yeah. Well, and that's something, man, my gosh. Well, your life has changed.
540 pounds is profound. That's my 600-pound life.
Yeah. But your life has changed so significantly.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I weigh 250 pounds. After the surgery, I got 50-inch pants. I had 54-inch before that. After recovery from the surgery, removal of the drains, I was wearing 50-inch pants. And that was like almost 3 months after the surgery because how long it took the drains to come out.
Right.
And I bought from Amazon 52, 50, and 48. And, they have that try before you buy. And I kept the 50s. And it was just this week that I was like, my diabestie and I were talking. And she said, you lost a lot of weight. And my pants were falling off. I couldn't keep my pants off on. So I had to put more holes in my belt. Anyways, I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and order a 50, a 48, and a 46, and we'll see what happens. and the 46 fits.
Nice. Oh, that's so wonderful.
44 is not the big and tall store.
I started last year at a 38 waist, and I'm a 32 now. And I swear to you, I swear to you, I appreciate it, John, but I swear to you, I didn't think that was possible. Like, I mean, I really didn't think if I stuck my hands in my sides at my hips and pushed back then or now, like, I didn't think it was any different, but it is. It's so significantly different. It's crazy. Like I put a suit on today. I was out earlier and I had a suit on and I got to this place where, I mean, everyone was wearing suits, but people just kept coming up to me like, "Oh my God, you look terrific." And I was like, "Thank you." I'm just smaller. That's all there is to it. Yeah.
When you have a 46-inch waist and you're wearing size 50 or 52 pants, it doesn't reflect where you are.
No, it makes it worse. It really does. Like, I'll tell you one of the silliest things that I've done in the last year, super simple, but I've donated a lot of clothing over the last year. And I was been very careful not to buy a bunch because I'm like, I'm not where I'm going yet. I'm not going to buy a bunch of clothing and then give it away again. Like I was living on like the same 2 pairs of pants, like through the winter. You know what I mean? Like doing that thing.
Yeah.
But I spend a few extra dollars now on my t-shirts so that they're a higher quality fabric. And I find that I just think I'm presenting better now. And
yes,
you lose that like clean feeling when your clothing is too big as well. Like it's not just the fabric.
Absolutely.
It's the way it fits you. You look homeless, basically. You know what I mean? You look like you reached into a bag and you took what they gave you is basically how it ends up, coming off.
It reminds me at the height. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it impacts how you feel about yourself and you don't realize it right away.
When I was at my maximum weight and went to the big and tall store and had to go to the far end of the pants to the 74s, and all they have are bright orange and checkered plaid.
Mm. That seems like a joke. That seems like a joke, doesn't it, John? Yeah.
It seems like a cruel joke.
Yeah.
And, I ordered some jeans they're going to get here tomorrow. Everything's Amazon.
Yeah.
I ordered some denim jeans. They're not quite Levi's 501s, I'll get there. Maybe. I don't even know if they still make those, but there's some jeans and I expect, to really dig on that. And I'm going to get shirts next, a couple of shirts.
Let me ask you a question. I was sharing this with my wife the other day. If I have a larger meal than I'm accustomed to now, and I feel full, to just have that very full feeling, when I get to a mirror, I almost consciously expect to look fatter. and when I don't, I'm stunned. And it's a real...
I can see that.
Yeah, so I told my wife, and as I was saying it to her, she goes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, if you feel full, when you look yourself in the mirror, you expect to see the old you there. And I was like, oh my God.
Can I suggest?
Yeah, please.
Let me suggest something that comes to mind. This may or may not be true, but this is a perception I have on it. Is when you're full like that and satiated, you're on a drug rush. And that same drug rush makes you remember the conditions of that addiction.
Could very well
and
be.
put you in the mind of that body.
Yeah.
You become that person that's under the control of overeating or bad eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so you feel like that person. And it doesn't change just because of that one meal. And you look at yourself and you're like, no, I'm still okay. But maybe that's a mechanism to make you think, hey, don't.
It's been an illuminating year so far, I have to say.
I like to follow. I enjoy the journey you've had on that as well.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you.
How's your glucose? How's your
mine's good.
Pre-diabetic diet? Okay.
Yeah, I've had my endocrinologist told me last year, she said, look, based on all of your A1Cs over the years that I see, she goes, I think it is incredibly unlikely for you to ever develop type 2 diabetes. And I was like,
so, I've known super obese people that are dead now that did not have diagnosed diabetes.
Yeah. My fasting glucoses are always like in the, 80s.
Nice.
I think I should knock on something probably, but I think I'll be all right in that space. Now, I don't know if I'll get type 1 diabetes, but yeah,
that gets triggered, right, by events, right? You get COVID. I've
never done TrialNet personally. So I don't know if I have markers or not.
Well, you know as much as anybody, more than anybody, the genetic relationships in the family tree actions that go.
I don't think it's not possible. That's for sure. I'm just trying to, I mean, at this point, John, I'm just trying to eat well and move and continue in the right direction. Those are my goals.
Something I wanted to share that I thought of just a few moments ago is I like being hungry.
Okay.
It's a feeling I enjoy. I don't like being hungry to the point where I'm feeling physically impacted, like, I'm not low sugar per se, but like I'm ravenously hungry. But I like to be hungry, and that's a feel. I think that's because that's a feeling I never had. I thought I was hungry. I was obsessed. I was feeding the drug needs. I was hungry for the dopamine.
Yeah.
But so my fasting isn't at all difficult for me. And when I do get a little hungry, I know that, dinner's coming soon. I make beautiful food. If you look at my timeline on Facebook, you'll see that I just make really, really good meals. So I was also worried, am I going to have a rebound where I go from obsessive eating to some sort of anorexic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely not. I enjoy my food so much.
Good. I'm glad. I have to say I do too. I made like a chicken sandwich last night for dinner. Like I took some chicken breast and I seasoned them and I put a tiny bit of oil in the pan, a little olive oil.
Nice.
And I fried them up and they were nice and tasty. I put it in a pita, threw some lettuce in with it. I grated a tiny bit of cheese over it. I sat and ate it. It was half a chicken breast. And I got done. I'm like, I am full. This is great. I'm good.
And you know what? The half of the time you spent making it was as much a part of that meal as the part.
No, for sure. Yeah, no, I love making food. I still do. I like making food for my kids too. Like it makes me happy to cook for them. But John, then I got up this morning and I went to a viewing today. So, and people are like, oh, Scott in the middle of the week in a suit, but nothing fancy. I did not eat today until about, I think, 2:00 in the afternoon. And I was hungry at that point. But if I wouldn't have eaten, I would have been okay too.
Yep.
Now it's 6 p.m. Like obviously my day is a little upside down because this viewing came out of nowhere and John was nice to move his recording around with me. I'm probably going to finish with you and go have the other half of that chicken breast in a similar pita again. That's probably how I'll end the day.
Last night I had a cup of soup for my meal. It was a very light day. Today, I don't know what I've got defrosted. I'll have to figure that out. Oh, I'll probably have an omelet.
Okay. Oh, I eat a lot of eggs.
Yep.
Yeah. Usually for breakfast, I have a couple of eggs in a wrap with some protein, usually, something like that. I do that in the morning a lot. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I'm going to have an omelet with sausage.
Yeah, it's nice. All right, it's time for me to ask you if we've missed anything, because I know you had some pretty specific, like you're very prepared and I appreciate it. And yet you're very conversational, which I also appreciate. So I want to make sure we're not missing anything that you meant to talk about.
I wanted to talk about the consistency and the improvement, the fact that it wasn't just an overnight thing and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of sustaining a healthy relationship with my diabetes and the other factors in my life is I think a big part of my message is that it's not rigorous for me. It's very affirming and positive. It reduces stress in my life. I'm not at odds with the way I eat, and I'm constantly rewarded with the results I see. And I continue to increase those rewards. It's, diminishing returns is not really here yet because there's so many things that I continue to be able to improve.
Yeah.
And another part of the message is it's never too late. And I guess another part of the message is there's more that binds us than separates us. And so a healthy lifestyle, healthy social interactions, healthy interactions with food, all these things will reduce our suffering and help us to focus on the things that are effective in treating the chronic illnesses we have. And so I really appreciate that your group is open to all of us.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. I want very much for the group to be open to everybody. I also think that what helps you as a person with type 2 diabetes, what helps a person with type 1 diabetes, and what helps a person who doesn't have diabetes, speaking about like just general health, food, that kind of thing, I don't know that any of us are in a different boat than anybody else.
Bingo.
You know what I mean? I think quality food at a reasonable proportion is something everyone should be aiming at. I just think that people with diabetes are forced to pay attention to it sooner in life than maybe people without it are.
Yes, but you know what? The Epilepsy Foundation has a whole webpage about addressing diet and exercise.
Right. Everybody should be doing what you're doing to some degree or another. Obviously, it wasn't easy for you. You had mitigating factors. So do a lot of other people. But I mean, it's just very impressive that you stayed after it. John, you speak like a young man. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. Like, and you have a younger voice, but like, it's important to remember you're 63 years old. You know, and you're doing these things, and you have the attitude of somebody who's 25 and just gained 10 pounds and realized, oh my God, it's getting away from me. You're trying with that kind of energy. And I think that may be the most impressive part of this whole thing, to be perfectly honest. And if people go back to listen to your first episode, a number of things stacked against you when you were growing up too. So
yeah, it was a bit rough.
Yeah,
you know what?
It's a bit rough. That's a very kind way to talk about it, John. But yeah, it was a bit rough.
I like to say, it's half jokingly or whatever, but I'm a 63-year-old guy who acts sometimes like he's 12 and thinks he's like 25.
That's good, though. I think that I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that it'd be easy for people to listen to you and forget that you're a 63-year-old man who's been through all this and whose body's been through what it's been through, and you're still putting in this effort. And you're willing to take slow returns, too.
Well, I believe the biggest gift I have right now is sharing my success with other people that can identify with it and adopt some of the elements, see hope in it and maybe adopt some of these elements to address their needs when they're much, much younger.
Yeah. I want to say, too, that I think the GLP has helped me. So I've always, like, as an adult, I always kind of endeavor to find things that make me more patient, because my patience is not good, right?
Same.
I do things like I raise cactuses because they grow very slowly.
Nice.
And if you get it to grow an inch in a year and you don't kill it, you've really accomplished something.
Uh-huh.
And so I like the idea of doing something that doesn't pay you back right away. The GLP helped me with that too. And here's how. I knew I was going to lose weight on the GLP. I just knew I was going to. But I knew it wasn't going to happen quickly. And I was able to, instead of saying, I got to lose weight, I want to be 10 pounds lighter in a week or a month, or like having that kind of like fervor for it. I was able to say, I don't care how long this takes, because I know when I get there, I'm going to be where I mean to be. And that was really helpful. And then because of the GLP, there was weight loss along the way. So I didn't endure 2 and 3 weeks in the first 6 months where I was like, my God, my weight's not going down. Always felt like it was working, which allowed me to actually be patient. You call it a crutch or whatever you want. I'm looking for doctors to come on and talk about how the medications work. I think I've got a couple lined up, but I genuinely believe I have some sort of a deficiency that it's covering. And just being able to see things moving in the right direction allowed me to act about my weight the way I do about the cactus. I go, there's a little light green ring. It grew. And I was able to say that's fine because it's alive and I've got all the time in the world. So I'll just wait. I don't know. I think being patient is a big part of having the kind of success that you had. And I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I can relate in one way directly. I have 8 aquariums here, and the largest are 60 and 75 gallons. The smallest are 40. I practice a style of fish keeping that is, you would call, a balanced environment. So a lot of people are focused on changing the water in the tank regularly and adding additives and all this. My focus is on doing as little as possible to achieve a balanced ecosystem. And my aquariums are just gorgeous, full of plant growth. The fish live forever. Everything's pretty cool. And for me, that is a part of my diabetes self-care. The ability to maintain those environments in balance is informed by my ability to do it myself. So your thing with the cactus, I can really relate to, because my thing with the aquariums is related to my self-care.
Yeah. I've talked about this in the podcast in a couple of little places, but I've almost by mistake become a person who owns a chameleon. And it's lovely. The chameleon's absolutely lovely, but it was a gift. And the people who gave me the gift, as much as I appreciate it, didn't actually buy me the chameleon that I would have bought for myself had I bought a chameleon. So once I learned how to and it's another one of those things. It's an incredible amount of detail that, to do it right. And, again, there's this living thing on the other side waiting, for you to do it right, So I added a second chameleon. I have two. I'm not going to get any more, I promise. The second one I got grows incredibly slowly over like 3 years to become even to an adult size, and may keep growing beyond that. But it needs a really large enclosure. And it's the same idea. Like, there's this little tiny baby thing right now that looks like it's in a world that's too big for itself. But it's not. And I don't get to see it fill up unless I do a good, balanced, slow and steady job for this little animal for at least 3 years. Right?
Bingo.
And I think of it the same exact way. Like, I like that it can't be rushed. I think it's important for people.
And that's the way I feel about my goals for my diabetic control of my weight. It's been going actually remarkably quickly, but I never had any impetus to do it any other than there's a phrase I use. It's 1 millimole at a time.
It's a great way to put it. If you're measuring your weight loss, your health recovery, your diabetes care, any of that stuff in days or weeks, I think you're putting yourself in an unfair position.
You'll never get there.
Yeah.
You know what you have to do? You have to keep hiking. And when you get to the next rest place, you look down and you see the progress you've made.
Yeah.
And then you snack, you rest, you drink your water, and you get up and you walk the next mile.
Buy another pair of pants 2 inches smaller and get going again.
Exactly. I mean, can you imagine when I get to go to town and buy pants at a store?
Yeah. No, I'm excited for you, honestly. Yeah, seriously.
That's a couple months away.
Yeah. No, listen, I feel weird saying this, but, there's a death in my extended family. It came out of nowhere. I had to go to a viewing today, and it was yesterday afternoon. I said to my wife, "Oh my God, I don't have anything to wear to this viewing." And I ran out last night at like 7:00. And I was like, she's like, "What are you gonna do?" I'm like, "I gotta go to Macy's and get a jacket." Like, you know what I mean? Like, I gotta, so
be respectful.
Man, listen, he's a great guy, and he died, and he deserves for me to show up at his viewing in a suit. And it's just how I feel about it. So,
yes.
So I'm out, and I got to tell you, as sad as the reason was I was shopping, I never had a better half an hour of my life in a store. I mean, I tried every jacket on. I looked good in every one of them. I was like, oh my God. Like, I thought that color wasn't for me. I thought that print was. It wasn't that. It was, I was overweight. I didn't even realize it. And so I was able to shop. I felt terrific, like doing it. I at one point, I was like, I'm going to try on this slim cut. I was like, oh my God, this fits too. Like, none of this makes any sense. I walked out of there. I felt like I was 12 feet tall. Like, seriously.
Hey, I don't want to be too presumptuous, but you know what? I'll bet you the old man smiled at that.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the best tribute you could make to anybody you love, is to take care of yourself and to be in a place where you can feel that way.
I was the happiest person at a funeral today you've ever seen in your life. I was just like, man, I know I look good in this suit. As much as it's not about how you look, it's how healthy you feel. It is. Like, to some degree, yes. I feel better because I look better. And that's just, I didn't dislike myself before, John, and I don't like myself more now. But it's just that I'm having a different lived experience at this point.
I think that's a good way to put it. And when I put on those 46s, I had the 46, the 48, and the 50. I said, let's start at the 46. I can get done with this. And when they fit, it was like, the heavens opened. There were trumpets. There was like a little giggity. I mean, It was a high. It felt really good. It felt like arriving.
Oh my God. Even pushing the clothing into like one of those bins where you make the donations. I've never been so happy to give something away that I just bought. I was like, oh my God, I hope somebody else can use this, but it's not mine anymore. And I don't need it because I'm, 38, 36, 34, actually when it went to 32, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, so.
And you know what? I have that history of gaining weight back.
Mm-hmm.
I've broken through that so far beyond that. I'm never going back.
I feel that way too. My wife was like, are you going to keep anything? And I was like, no. I was like, I will not. It'll be my punishment to myself if I have to go back out and buy something at a bigger size. So then I don't know if that's healthy or not, but I was like, I'm not keeping any of this because it felt like a crutch if I did, honestly.
Hey, I did get to talk about everything, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to share my story again.
No, of course. All right. Well, John, I'm terrific. I'm going to let you go defrost your meal, and I'm going to make my chicken sandwich, and we're all going to go be happy and healthy.
Yes.
Hold on for me for a second. I'd like to say goodbye privately.
Sure.
Thanks. Let's get rid of that FOMO by visiting omnipod.com/juicebox and checking out the Omnipod 5 today. Get rid of your fear of missing out on Omnipod by getting yourself an Omnipod. A huge thank you to Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Are you tired of having to change your sensor every 7 to 14 days? With the Eversense CGM, you just replace it once every 6 months via a simple in-office visit. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. If you have type 2 or pre-diabetes, the Type 2 Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast is exactly what you're looking for. Do you have a friend or a family member who is struggling to understand their type 2 and how to manage it? This series is for them. 7 episodes to get you on track and up to speed. Episode 860, Series Intro. 864, Guilt and Shame. Episode 869, Medical Team. 874, Fueling Plan. Episode 880, Diabetes Technology. Episode 885, GLP-1s, metformin, and insulin. And in episode 889, we talk about movement. This episode is with me and Jenny Smith. Of course, you know Jenny is a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She's a registered and licensed dietitian, and Jenny has had type 1 diabetes for over 30 years. Too many people don't understand their type 2 diabetes, and this series aims to fix that. Share it with a friend or get started today. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. The group now has 47,000 members in it. It gets 150 new members a day. It is completely free, and at the very least, you can watch other people talk about diabetes. And everybody is welcome. Type 1, Type 2, gestational, loved ones, everyone is welcome. Go up into the featured tab of the private Facebook group, and there you'll see lists upon lists of all of the management series that are available to you for free in the Juicebox Podcast. Becoming a member of that group, I really think it will help you. It will at least give you community. You'll be able to kind of lurk around, see what people are talking about, pick up some tips and tricks. Maybe you can ask a question or offer some help. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.